Kane Williamson is a great example that you can play all three formats, but still adapt your game to each.
Jofra Archer's easiness reminds me a lot of Michael Holding.
That is an absolute jaffer from Archer.
Graham Gooch, when he led England, he led with a lot of pride and passion, and you wanted to play for Graham Gooch.
We are mere days away from Test cricket resuming. Welcome to Cricket Inside Out. It's very fitting that this week we welcome to the show Judge Bishop, as Ian Smith calls him, Ian Bishop, who is in England, as well as making his debut on Cricket Inside Out, Nasser Hussain. Welcome to the show, Nas.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be on with the Judge Bishop. I have no idea why he's called the Judge, but it is a pleasure.
I'm not sure where it emanated with Smithy, to be honest. I can't remember. Yesterday's a distant memory to me, so we'll see how it goes.
Bish, tell us about the international journey to England. Most of us haven't flown in a few months, let alone across the ocean. What is it like?
Strange. The airports are almost like ghost towns, some of them certainly in the Caribbean, and then going through the US and the UK, so many of the shops that you're accustomed to seeing and patronizing at airports, international airports, are closed. A lot of the food places are closed. So I can only imagine the number of people who are out of jobs as well because of all of that. So my heart really goes out to everyone in this paradigm suffering because of this virus.
Yeah, it is. Obviously, it's a very tough time, but probably all the more reason why sport is so important. At least we'll have something to instill some hope and certainly get us excited about some live entertainment on our TVs as well. Now, cricket is back. England versus West Indies. The series is coming up. We have some live cricket to preview, which is something that we've all been counting down towards. Can I push you for a prediction? I know Ian Bishop is always loath, but can I get a series prediction from you, Nasser Hussain?
Well, I'll tell you what, one thing I will say is that history tells you be careful writing off this West Indies side. There are a few recently that have made fools of themselves saying, we will hammer the West Indies. I think the West Indies need to get some runs to be in this series. Hope and Brathwaite need to do a Headingley all over again because even though England have a fragility in their batting at the top, they are used to these conditions, those lads. So I think West Indies need to get runs. I'd slightly favour England. England are a very difficult side to beat at home, but don't rule out a Jason Holder side. I can sitting on the fence there.
So proper sitting on the fence. I don't even know if I should ask Ian Bishop for a prediction at this stage because I couldn't even get one out of Nasser Hussain.
No, predictions tend to hamper my job when I start working, so I tend to stay away from that. Look, there are tangibles there for us to cope with. I think because the two leading all-rounders are the captains, that gives each team a target to go at. If you can go at Ben Stokes and dishevel the leader, dishevel his game, then you start out with a plus point. And that first test is ultra important because England, because they've grown up all their lives and played here, they will eventually get back into gear and the engines will start purring again. But if you can catch slightly cold, that's why I'm looking at the first 3-4 days of this test match, however long it goes from a West Indies perspective, to see whether their engine can start clicking first.
Start clicking first. That's the advice, West Indies fans. That's what we should be hoping for. Now, let's move on to a very popular segment on the show. I do enjoy this one for all the personal insight that we tend to get out of our guests. And obviously, we're a little opportunistic this week. Our Hall of Famer is the most prolific run scorer of all time, 67,000 runs, career spanning the early 70s until the year 2000. England great, inducted in the inaugural Hall of Fame class in 2009. Graham Allen Gooch. Now, Nasser, you both obviously Essex and England players, a colleague of yours. Tell us about Graham Gooch, the guy that you know.
Graham Gooch, the guy that I know, is such a down-to-earth Essex lad, brought up in Leytonstone in South Essex or East London, West Ham fan for his sins, and he absolutely loved the game of cricket. He was very, very, I don't know if there's a more proud Englishman out there than Graham Gooch. He loved playing for, captaining his country. He loved Essex. I remember that innings he played, 1991, where he got 154 at Headingley. It was one of the great innings. It was on the BBC here recently. They put it on. It was one of the great innings against a very, very fine West Indies attack on a poor pitch at Headingley. Graham got a magnificent 154, and I wasn't in the England side there. And after the test, I went in the very next day, and Graham was in the nets the very next day, working hard with his coach to get ready for the Essex game. He never viewed playing for Essex any less of a hardship than playing for England. He took the two sort of sides of it very, very seriously. He was a magnificent cricketer, great player of fast bowling, great player of spin. His one area he struggled with was that sort of medium dobber that bowls stump to stump. And I'm going to use Terry Alderman. I don't mean him as a medium dobber, but anyone who bowled stump to stump, Graham had a bit of a heavy head and he would fall across the line and get out LBW. But apart from that nemesis of Alderman, Gooch was a magnificent cricketer.
Magnificent cricketer. What's interesting when you start looking at his stats, and I mean, there are so many phenomenal stats. Retired with 8,900 test runs, 4,290 ODI runs, also an England record at the time of his retirement. But one of the interesting things that I found in a bit of research in Bishop is his average of 44.84 against the West Indies. Now, the West Indies of that era, it should probably be added there as a little asterisk. Tell me about his success rate against the West Indies, and what do you think is behind that?
Well, I think one of the highest pieces of praise you could give to Graham, a colleague of mine, a respected colleague who's watched the game for a long time, assigned himself a task last week of picking a team that would beat the West Indies of that era, that 80s era, which was the number one team in the world. And Graham Gooch was one of the openers that he chose for that team. And simply because of the fact that he played fast bowling so very well, 500s against the West Indies, 2 against an exceptionally talented, great bowling team in 1981 in the Caribbean, and scoring those hundreds, I think at Bridgetown, Barbados, and I think Jamaica. And if I'm correct in that, those are 2 of the most ferocious pitches in the Caribbean, certainly at that time. That tells you about his ability to play pace, but his bravery as well, coming up against the Holdings, the Marshalls, the Garners, maybe Colin Prof was in there as well. And of course, that 100 Nasser talked about at Headingley stands out like a beacon. So the fact that he could play spin 333 against India, but play fearsome pace with heart and character, it says a lot about Graham Gooch to play until he was, 42? And he missed 3 years of international cricket, possibly. So, look, great opening batsman, full of courage. I played a couple of test matches against him. I wouldn't say I was happy he was injured in the Caribbean. Nasser was there in 1990. I wasn't happy that he got injured, but that was a huge obstacle taken out of our way when he was struck in the finger by Ezra Wilson.
You talk about that 333 against India. I saw in an interview he said that Mickey Stewart berated him for not chasing the record when he got to that 300 mark. But he says he was chasing a team result over that own record. It didn't even occur to him until he'd already left the pitch. Isn't that a phenomenal testament to his approach? And you talk about that bravery. He's often quoted on record when he reflects on his career, always talking about taking responsibility. And it does, when you look at the evidence, the result, it does seem that that's the thing that kind of defined the way he played. Is that accurate, Nasser?
Yeah, he was absolutely driven towards winning. He wasn't worried about personal milestones. The only thing he was worried about personal milestone was being as good as he could possibly be. And that's why I give you the example of the day after the Headingley miracle innings. He wanted to get even better. He just didn't want to end his career saying, well, I could have been a bit better. I could have got a few more runs. I could have won a few more games for England. He had, with the bravery, he had a lot of pride as well in his own personal performance and the performance of the team. And even since he retired, he became an England batting coach, and he used to get very disappointed when the batsmen almost couldn't do what he wanted them to do. So he was a very, very proud man as well. People forgetting the 333. I think he got 120 in the other innings as well in that game. Now that is pretty good on the average, 450 runs in a test match or whatever. That's like a whole summer for me. He got it in one test match.
What was his approach to captaincy? What did he bring to English cricket as a leader?
Lead by example. Graham would never ask you to do something that he wasn't willing to do himself. Fitness was high on his agenda. It was almost like a new era. Before Gooch, it was like old school. You just play as hard as you can on the field and off the field, go and enjoy yourself, turn up the next day. Graham and Mickey Stewart, who was his coach, as you just mentioned there, were very keen on getting the fitness. Some didn't buy into that. I remember Phil Tufnell, when he asked Phil Tufnell to go on a 3-mile run, I think Tuffers turned to him and said, when you find a cricketer that can hit the ball 3 miles, Gucci, I'll go on a 3-mile run. But at the moment, no one can. So some Tuffers didn't play much after that, mind. So some didn't buy into that idea. But Gucci was ahead of his time. Well, you see the modern cricketer now, how fit and chiseled and strong they are. Gucci, bought into that very, very early. But you are in answer to your original question, pride. Graham Gooch, when he led England, he led with a lot of pride and passion, and you wanted to play for Graham Gooch.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nasser Hussain. Always great to hear people who really served in the trenches talking about our Hall of Famers. Great personal anecdotes here on Cricket Inside Out. Now we are opening the floor to our fans, as we do every week. And as you do every week, you've delivered the questions. So thank you so much for being part of the show. At Venkat8987 asks, Mr. Bishop, I like your commentary the most of all. Who is your commentary inspiration, and who's the commentator you like most outside of Nasser? Loads of presumptions being made here.
Those are very difficult questions. Look, at coming through the system, I never thought I'd be sitting in the position that I am today doing commentary on a cricket game. I wanted to get as far away from cricket once I retired. I must confess that I didn't want to have anything to do with egotistical sportsmen like myself. So it's purely by chance that I got into this. I just look at everyone. Nasser's been brilliant across his career. He's taken to commentary like a duck to water from the moment he stepped into the commentary box, stepping off the cricket field. He's been outstanding, one of the best in the world. So I'm just going to say that I look at different people and try to understand what they do very well and try to ensure that I'm able to sell to the viewer and to the listener, having listened to these great commentators across time, to ensure that I keep the viewer and the listener informed.
Anirban 27470917 asks, according to both of you, who technically is the best all-time batsman and best all-time bowler? Nasser.
Well, I guess I should do the batsman because I have no idea on bowling techniques at all, especially with present company. Technique is about getting runs. So whoever gets the most runs, forget about who has the best technique. So you'd have to say Kohli is up there. But I would look, technique is getting runs in all parts of the world. And I like someone who plays with soft hands, let the ball come to them, plays it underneath them. And when we're analysing them, like we do on Sky or whatever, you think, how would I get this bloke out as captain? I'd say Kane Williamson for me. You look at the number of balls he plays that he hits down in the ground and it goes behind square on the offside. That's a great sign that he's playing the ball late with soft hands. And a sort of victim of modern T20 cricket and white ball cricket is that players have got hard hands going at the ball and nick it a lot. Kane Williamson is a great example that you can play all three formats, but still adapt your game to each.
Interesting perspective. Ian Bishop?
I just want to get this clear. Are we talking of the current era? You said all time. Is it really all time?
All time.
Old time, sorry. This was current era, sorry. I went current era.
I was hoping you'd say current era, to be quite honest with you.
If I can go all time, I would say Sachin Tendulkar had a magnificent technique. The amount of meetings we had I had as an England captain trying to work out how to get Sachin out was absolute nightmare. I thought you meant who's playing at the moment. Trying to drag this back, Bish.
You've done a good job. Excellent job of pulling. That's very Richie Bennell-like, to be quite honest with you. I want to pick up on two things Nas said there. First of all, when we're talking technique is really, when you break it down, how can a batsman get bat to ball efficiently and effectively in whatever mode he chooses? You look at Steve Smith. You wouldn't say Steve Smith or Marcus Labuschagne have what you call orthodox technique, but my goodness, they're scoring a lot of runs. Graham Smith from South Africa. So it comes down to preference and what I like to see. And I've often said I like straight lines, players that play in straight lines. And Sachin Tendulkar always said the most difficult batsman that I have bowled against in my career, because primarily of those straight lines, but his ability to generate awesome power and hit what I would think are good balls to the boundary.
Oh, that was glorious. I don't think there's anybody who plays that shot better than Sachin Tendulkar.
Oh, that's a great shot again. That's the Tendulkar trademark.
In terms of bowling technique, of the modern guys, I think Jofra Archer's easiness reminds me a lot of Michael Holding. Are two of the easiest, most orthodox actions that I have seen. So I can't say that I'm right on these two selections, but they are certainly my preferences. I rate Jofra's potential very, very highly, easy on the eyes and generates easy pace.
At PS_it_is asks, how tough is it for commentators not to bring their personal preferences to work? And how do you manage to stay calm and collected, focusing on the job at hand in moments like, for example, last summer, the Cricket World Cup final? Nasser.
Well, when you've played the game for a long time and you're worried about the game so much, and I was a massive worrier about the game day in, day out, it was like an exam to me, to be honest. It was a nightmare. So when I finished, I sort of made a pact with myself that I wouldn't worry too much. It's someone else's turn now. It's the next generation. So when I sit in a commentary box, yes, of course, you'd like England to win. When you've been an England captain, you'd like England to do well. But, I've listened to the commentators and the great commentators and broadcasters of time. When Richie Benaud was commentating, or Ian Smith or whoever, you don't know which side they're supporting or wanting to do well. They're just there to call the moment, really. So just try and call the moment. Try not to mess it up. And try and be impartial. I think the best broadcasters, the best commentators are completely impartial. There's enough people in the ground around the world that take sides. I don't think it's your job to take sides on a microphone. And how easy is it to stay calm and quiet? It depends who you're working with. Like I say, in the World Cup final, when you sat between Ian Bishop and Ian Smith, even in those amazingly nervous, out of this world time that it was, that Lord's final, it's very easy to stay calm because you got Bishop on one side and Ian Smith on the other. Or Headingley, when Ben Stokes is playing like he did, and I had Ricky Ponting next to me calling it in a completely unbiased way, it was very easy to stay calm because you had professionals working all around you.
Have you got any advice for up-and-coming commentators, Mr. Bishop, on how to achieve that level of calm, the inner zen that the judge is known for?
Wow, in a zen. First of all, for Nas, I'm still trying to read Nasser actually, because when he's on commentary, he's like he's in a zone, he's in a bubble. He just like seems emotionless. So it's interesting for me to hear him answer that question. He's so locked in and focused. I don't know, my thing is sometimes I wonder, even with journalists and stuff, whether you can achieve 100% objectivity, whether that is humanly possible. But we do try to keep it level as much as we can. And one of my guiding principles, the guiding principle that I operate by, is that if I'm invested into the game, I'm passionate about any cricket that I watch. So if the West Indies are winning something, for example, I can, because I'm a West Indian and a former player, I understand what those players have gone through if they achieve any success. So to be able to call a moment with passion is easy. And I often say is that West Indies fans aren't the only ones watching. There are Afghanistan fans, there are Indian fans, there are South African fans, there are English fans. And when their team has a high point or a high moment, they want the same exuberance, the same storytelling. One of the things that I always get thrown at me by West Indian fans is they say, be so excited about if Scotland wins a match. Well, I'm not there commentating as a former West Indian player, waving the flag for my team. I want the Scottish fans to have the very same experience, the very same level of excitement, the very same level of emotion, if I can possibly relay that, as a West Indian team would have, because I'm familiar with it.
That's really cool to hear. And Nasser, I've got a question here from Carl Stapmokal, who wants to know, looking at England's performance in white ball cricket in the past few years and all bases covered in all departments, do you think England will dominate this particular format in coming years, irrespective of the conditions they play in?
Yeah, you've got to be very careful, actually. Any sports psychologist, anyone in charge of a team will say, if you win something and you just think by staying at that level that you'll then go on to win other things, you don't realize that every other team is catching up and will pretty quickly go past you. So Owen Morgan will think, how do we improve this side? How do we get even better? That'll be a difficult thing to do because their improvement over the last 2 or 3 years has been exponential. I think in the batting department, they've got a lot of players that can be interchangeable. You only have to look at the side and the squad they've picked here now. There's a lot of players like Bant and even Hales, who is still left out of the fold. There are still players out there that can come into this side. I guess in the bowling department, to make sure that they keep that bowling attack fresh, keep replacing people, keep rotating people, and keep looking to improve. And also the game, staying up with the game. Making sure that the game, that the game will change in a certain direction and you are slightly ahead of the curve, not behind the curve, so that when they do turn up for the next World Cup, the next world event, whenever that might be, wherever that might be, they fully know what to expect there and not be like previous England generations that seem to be behind the curve.
It reminds me of something Serena Williams once said. Ian, she said that the reason she stayed on top of her game for so long is because everyone raises their game when they know that they're going to play her. When you are at the top of the pile, everyone else who plays you just edges it up a notch because they want to get one in over you. I guess it does serve for some athletes to have that position of dominance.
I think you'd rather be in a position of dominance, I would think, rather than being one of the also-rans. Having played in a West Indies team that was very dominant, we didn't complain about that position at all. England are not going to complain, for example, about being World Cup winners next time the 50-over World Cup comes around, nor the West Indies being defending champions of the T20 World Cup. What there is an additional responsibility to live like the defending champs and to play like it. But that's a responsibility, I think, most teams rather have. I know there are underdogs who prefer to sneak in from the backdrop. I don't necessarily see things that way. So you've always got to be aware, though, and I'm sure the great players before my time always said that to me, that once you're at the top of that tree, as you guys said just now, people are hunting to cut you down from it. So you're always going to have to look, how can we take a next step and build on what we've done successfully before?
Now, one team that can't boast too much success at ICC World events is South Africa. And Yo Bruce 123 on Instagram says, what should be done by South Africa in order to win more knockout games in ICC tournaments? Nasser Hussain, have you got some advice?
I have not. I wish Bish would have gone first on this one. No, it's not. It's not the fact. You could probably help us on this, Elma, to be honest. It's not the fact. There's no shame in losing. Honestly, there is absolutely no shame in losing. England have lost for hundreds of years with ICC events. It is with the players that they've had and not won an ICC event of late. That is what must grind South African fans. When you've had De Villiers, when you've had Callis, when you've had Pollock, when you've had Donald and Smith and all the John T. Rhodes and the players they've had over their time, I guess once it becomes a habit, it's a very difficult habit to break out of. It becomes an issue. It's like and I know this one, getting run out a lot or being involved in run-outs. The next time you get in that situation, it just happens to you. And that's what seems to happen to South Africa in semi-finals. Because they have a history of semi-final losses, big game losses, however much they blanket and all the mind games that they do, we are over this or we're not over it and we've got to learn from it. Whatever the mind games they do, that when it comes to that crunch moment, somehow South Africa don't step over the line. So whether it's mental toughness, whether it's just addressing that moment and grabbing it by the scruff of the neck, no one knows. But the problem now is that at the moment, the cricket is not as strong. So it may take a time before they do compete. But in the flip side of that is that the expectation isn't there. Maybe with those great South African sides, there was an expectation. Maybe this present generation, there isn't, and they might just sneak in the radar and sneak under the radar and surprise a few.
And Nasser, here's another question. We have one from Axel Blaze ICC. Wants to know, share your experience of the 0203 NatWest series and a few words about Dada's captaincy.
Could you give me some easy questions, please? Seriously. That was my most favourite and least favourite game I've ever played in, to be honest. It was one of the great one-day games that we had of that generation. India hadn't won a major, final for a long time, and it looked like they were going to lose that one. And I enjoyed playing against Ganguly. Ganguly, I've always said, has made Indian cricket tough. It's made it what it is now, actually. Before Saurav, they were a very nice bunch to play with some great cricketers, but Saurav made them into a very tough, determined. You'd be out there waiting for the toss. 10:30, where's Ganguly? 10:31, where's Ganguly? And he'd sort of stroll up, chuck his paper, his team at you, and you knew they were a feisty bunch to beat. And when he took his shirt off on the balcony, brilliant. That is Ganguly at his best, to be honest. I'll show the world. Flintoff did it in Mumbai. I'm doing it at Lord's. So I'm a massive fan of Ganguly. I'm just not a fan of that day.
Can I just throw this out there? Using what Nasser said there, it just had me thinking, listening intently to what he said there about Ganguly, going back to your South African question. When we played India, when India were never good travelers, Nasser will notice the team was never a good traveling team, and particularly if they came to the Caribbean, we knew that we had one up on them because of the history that we had. And suddenly you're saying, little by little, Sourav Ganguly managed to change that mindset. Nasser will know from his own leadership that he had to change a mindset of an England team to what he determined was a tougher, more professional unit. Is that something that can change South African cricket in this dispensation where the talent is not what it was? It's a fresh, new clay that some leader, whether it's a coach and a captain or a captain to come in with a mindset to say, we are going to change the dynamic. So I think it's going to happen for South Africa. Some good will come out of this. They'll find leadership that will turn all this around, because you cannot generalize an entire society and say that everyone is stereotyped this way. Somebody's going to turn this around, and it'll come from one of those leaders.
Okay, awesome input there, and some very wise words shared by our analysts here on Cricket Inside Out. Next up, we are still busy compiling that cricket wish list of ours. We get to travel, well, some of us, Ian Bishop, gets to travel internationally again, and we've all been pining for some new horizons. I know Nasser's usual travel schedule is a lot more hectic than what he's had in 2020 so far. Booking.com asked us to make this list. What was your favorite venue to play at, Nasser? And is it the same one you love commentating at, or is there another one for commentary duties?
Very good question. I mean, my favourite venue is obviously Lord's. Absolutely love the place. Growing up, when I was younger, I didn't get any runs at Lord's, and we didn't particularly win at Lord's. It wasn't until 2001 when Gough and Cork knocked off the winning runs against the West Indies, and we won the Wisden Trophy for the first time in 30-odd years, that we realised the importance of Lord's and the crowd and buying into it. It's like the Masters, and it's like Augusta National, Lord's cricket ground. It has their own rules, and you have to buy into it, whether you're England captain or whoever you might be. So once we realised that, we played better at Lord's. I just love the place as a broadcaster, as a player. Very special. The old and the new, they marry the two together perfectly. As a broadcaster, I like, and just as a general person that's been stuck in lockdown for 4 months, if you could give me Barbados and Accra Beach and a jet ski and then go and commentate in the cricket ground there, I'm a happy man.
I feel like this is what everyone says every week. When we say, where do you want to go commentate? They're all like, can I get Barbados? Can I get anywhere in the West Indies, please?
I thought this was a question about the commentary box. I didn't realize this was a question about the surroundings of the commentary box. Nasser's taking some of these questions to another level here, to be honest.
I've got the beach, I've got the drink, I've got jet ski, I've got everything sorted. You can commentate. I'll sit on the beach all day, Bish.
Mr. Bishop, your favourite?
Grounds that I enjoyed playing at, there'll be two of them. And there are reasons of the pitch in Perth, Australia, the old Perth Stadium, Western Australia, because of the pitches that I played on. Sabina Park in Jamaica was another ground that I love, partly because the crowd were very pro-West Indies, and they really gave you something that players will probably miss in this West Indies-England series. They gave you that drive. The pitch itself was not always as quick. So those two grounds, from a commentary point of view, broadcasting Lords, the way that the locality of the press box, the modernity of the press box, and as Nasser said, everything seems to be serene within that venue itself and very historical.
Yeah, very, very historical. Have you got a favorite spot you'll be traveling to once you're able to, Nasser, outside of England?
Yeah, I mean, I like my Europe city breaks, a little bit of culture, try and get off into Europe. That would be nice. Try and get to places that don't play cricket. I think that would be absolutely lovely. So yeah, just a bit of travel away from cricket. That's why I like Europe. They don't do a lot of cricket there. So a nice little city break. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Maybe Barcelona or somewhere like that. And catch a game of football as well. I like my football. So even though it's on the telly, being at a ground, there's nothing better than out stadium at the Emirates or New Camp or somewhere like that. So try and grab a game of football, hopefully in the non too distant future.
And then is there the best country to tour to for cricket, Bish? The country that just puts it all out there. I've got a feeling you might say India.
Well, it depends on what point I'm going to bring across, to be honest. If you're talking about the passion of the fans, just the whole surrounding of the noise around cricket, then India is incomparable. But I love playing in England. I loved playing county cricket because, one, you can drive everywhere that you need to go to venues. You don't have to go through airports. You don't have to get on planes. You don't have to check your baggage in. The cool conditions are always something for most of the summer that really sat well with me. I'm not a guy. Listen to this, folks. I don't always appreciate the hot, humid conditions and hot sun. I like coolness, and England provided. Don't fall over and shock me.
Fish. But mate, sorry, I'm gonna have to interrupt you. You're staying at Michael Holding's house. There must be the thermostat must be going up and down, because there is not a man on the planet that moans more about the cold English commentary box than Michael Holding. So who wins out on the thermometer in that house?
It's his house. I put my jumpers and my hoodie on if he has a thermostat. If it's too cold, and might need to light the fire. He's totally opposite from me. But I do prefer cool climatic conditions. And in terms of scenery and stuff, Australia, I think is also a wonderful place to visit.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nasser Hussain, on your debut episode of Cricket Inside Out. It was lovely to have you share some of your insight and phenomenal knowledge and experience. And then, Ian Bishop, thank you so much for your time again. Enjoy the rest of your tour in England.